Okay, next up, we're going to have a look at working with gradients inside Photoshop. And if you're not sure what a gradient is, all it is rather than painting with a single solid color, a gradient is a transition between at least two colors. You can have gradients that include 3 colors, 4 colors, 5 colors, as many colors as you want, really. But at least 2 colors. That's the minimum here. So I'm going to show you lots of cool stuff related to gradients here. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to just sort of pan over to the right-hand side of my artwork into some of this empty space that we have here. And I'm going to go and create a selection, a rectangular selection. So make sure to go and grab your rectangular marquee tool out of the toolbox and just drag out a selection, maybe something like this, right? Now, the reason why I'm creating a selection, by the way, is if we don't, then our gradient is going to fill our entire active layer, right? So in other words, it's going to fill the entire color layer inside the layers panel, and that's no good. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab Photoshop's gradient tool out of the toolbox. Go ahead and grab that fella. Now, by default, what we have is a gradient that's going to go from the foreground color to the background color. So the last foreground color that I had set was that sort of that brown that I had used for my robot's eye patch. And then it's going to start on that color and then it's going to blend into my background color, which is my light gray. Now, how do I know this? How do I know that it's going to go from the foreground to the background? Well, I'm looking up on my options bar and I'm looking right here and I can see there's the brown to the gray. Now, let me just show you that I know for sure that it's the foreground and background color. I'm going to drop down this menu, and if I hover over top of that first color swatch, it says foreground to background. That's always the default. So, knowing this, you might want to set things up before you actually grab your gradient tool. You might want to set your foreground color, and then hit the X key and set your background color, and then set your colors up the way you want. In other words, the right color for the foreground, the right color for the background, and then grab your gradient tool, knowing that foreground to background is going to be the default gradient, and then let her rip inside your artwork, right? So there you go. There's the default. The next swatch over, by the way, is another handy one, foreground to nothing, foreground to transparent, right? And then we have a bunch of other default gradients saved in here. There's all kinds of stuff here. You can mouse over top of these guys, violet to orange, or here we have orange, yellow, orange, or, all kinds of different things, right? So what I'm going to do to get us started here is I'm just going to grab one of these guys. I'll grab the blue, red, yellow swatch there. Just click on that guy, and that sets the gradient there. And then the other thing that I can do here on the options bar is I can decide the type of gradient that I want. The default is what's referred to as a linear gradient. So let me show you this guy first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my cursor over top of my selection inside my Photoshop file and simply drag from the top down to the bottom, something like this. And there's my gradient. Now, that's what they mean by a linear gradient. And by the way, as I'm dragging, I can do a couple of neat things. For example, I could start on the outside of this selection, drag into the selection, and then drag out of this selection again, something like this. Or I could drag a very short line, maybe on the inside to a shorter location inside to give me something like this, or outside to inside, or on different angles, all kinds of neat, weird, wacky things, right? So you might want to experiment with this for just a minute to see what you can come up with. If you want a perfectly straight gradient, hold down Shift as you drag, either up and down or left and right, something like this. So that's a linear gradient. We also have radial gradients as well, and this is going to give you sort of this kind of an effect, right? So that's kind of cool too. I use these guys quite often. There's a few others as well. We have an angle gradient, we have the reflected gradient, and then the diamond. So you can try each of these out if you want. I'll show you the diamond here really quick. So something like this, right? Again, kind of neat. But myself, normally I'm just using linear gradients and then sometimes those radial gradients. So hopefully that's all good. Now there's lots more to show you with your gradient tool here inside Photoshop. So let's continue on with our look at gradients.